There's a dangerous lie that almost no one dares to admit. Disrespect doesn't start big. It starts small, almost invisible. A comment here, an excuse there, an unintentional delay, a criticism for your own good, and you swallow it. Because you want to be mature, because you want to be balanced, because you don't want to seem exaggerated. But here's a counterintuitive statement. Those who try hardest to maintain peace are usually the ones being manipulated the most. Machiavelli already taught that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires observing patterns, not intentions. And if you look honestly, you'll realize that many signs were there all along, you just chose to ignore them. But here's the good news. If disrespect was allowed, it can also be stopped. And today, you're going to learn to identify exactly where you're creating loopholes and how to close them before they become chains. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He needs to understand something uncomfortable. Every ignored lie becomes silent authorization. When someone lies and he pretends not to notice, what's being taught there isn't forgiveness, it's a poorly applied strategy. Machiavelli already warned that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires observing patterns, not speeches. If he closes his eyes to a small dishonesty, he's training the other person to test greater limits. It's like leaving a door ajar, thinking no one will push it. And they will. Because decisions based on real human nature show that people expand what works. If lying has no consequences, lying becomes a tool. He may even think he's being evolved, but in practice he's misapplying the principle of the end justifies the means. The end is never peace, it's escalation. And curiously, whoever accepts the lie thinks they are being strong, when in reality they are giving up the calculated use of force. And force here isn't shouting, it's signaling. Imagine a simple example. Someone promises something and doesn't deliver, invents a weak justification, and he responds with, "It's okay, it happens." It happens once, twice, 3 times, and suddenly it becomes the norm. This isn't bad luck. It's virtù and fortuna being misinterpreted. Fortuna is the unforeseen. Virtù is the ability to react intelligently. If he never confronts, never asks firmly, never establishes consequences, he's teaching that the appearance of virtue, being understanding, patient, nice, is worth more than the truth. But Machiavelli would say, better to be feared than loved, if one must choose. And here it's not about intimidation, but about making it clear that lies cost something. It could be access, it could be priority, it could be trust. Your own loyal armies are not built on tolerated dishonesty. The problem is that he believes confrontation is an exaggeration. It's not. It's constant adaptability. If someone lies, he can respond with something simple and firm. I prefer you tell me the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Without aggression, but without smiling as if nothing happened. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean accepting anything, it means acting with precision. When he doesn't react, he's saying, you can try again. And they will try, because human nature tests boundaries. And if the lie grows, it doesn't come alone. It brings with it something more corrosive, something that starts small, almost imperceptible. and that often disguises itself as brutal honesty. He needs to learn to identify a modern trap. Destructive criticism disguised as sincerity. There's a stark difference between feedback and disrespect. But when someone says, "I'm just being honest," after belittling, embarrassing, or exposing you, that's not virtue. It's an attack with a moral veneer. Machiavelli understood something few admit. The appearance of virtue is one of the most used weapons in power games. Those who humiliate with an air of advice are applying politics guided by reality, not ideals, only for their own benefit. And if they accept this smiling, they are reinforcing the other person's strategy, because decisions based on real human nature show that people repeat behaviors that don't face resistance. The problem isn't hearing criticism. The problem is allowing self-esteem to be eroded under the guise of, "I want what's best for you." Better to be feared than loved. Sometimes it simply means not being seen as someone who swallows every comment. Imagine the scene. Someone says in public, laughing, "You're too sensitive, that's why you don't grow." It sounds like advice, but it carries poison. If he responds with an embarrassed laugh, he has validated the humiliation. Does the end justify the means? Yes, when the means is to preserve his position, he can calmly respond, "I prefer to discuss this in private." This is calculated use of force, not aggression, but elegant restraint. Virtù and fortuna come into play here in a practical way. Fortuna is the unexpected comment. Virtù is the firm stance that neutralizes the damage. And avoiding being hated doesn't mean accepting public disrespect to appear mature. It means acting with strategic intelligence. Your own loyal armies are not formed by those who laugh at your downfall, but by those who respect your presence. The most dangerous thing is when he starts to doubt himself. Repeated criticism becomes an internal narrative. And then the game changes level, because the manipulator no longer needs to speak. He has already planted the seed. Constant adaptability means noticing early and adjusting posture quickly. He can start by observing patterns. Does this person only criticize him? Only in public? Only when he grows up? This is not by chance. It's a test. And when someone tests your self-confidence, they are measuring how far they can go. And the next advance usually doesn't come as a joke. It comes as something even more subtle, the invasion of boundaries that he didn't even realize he left unprotected. He needs to face a simple but hard-to-swallow truth. A limit that doesn't generate consequences isn't a limit. It's a decorative suggestion. Saying, "I don't like this," and continuing to accept the behavior teaches that your words have no weight. And in the real game of relationships, politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands coherence between discourse and action. Machiavelli would never sustain authority with mere words. Authority is born from the predictability of the consequence. If someone crosses a line and nothing happens, the other person's brain registers, "I can go further." Decisions based on real human nature show that tolerance without reaction becomes an invitation. He may even believe he's being patient, but he is only postponing a greater invasion. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean being aggressive. It means being taken seriously. And being taken seriously depends on the silent firmness that accompanies each declared limit. Consider something practical. He says he doesn't accept constant delays, but he keeps waiting. He says he doesn't like jokes about his personal life, but he laughs to avoid creating tension. This isn't maturity. It's fear of conflict disguised as an appearance of virtue. The end justifies the means when the means are protecting one's own value. If someone disrespects a boundary, the response can be simple. Reduce access. Less availability, less priority, less energy. Calculated use of force is this, adjusting behavior without spectacle. Virtù and fortuna come into play here as the ability to act at the right moment. Fortuna is the test. Virtù is the firm and immediate response. Proper and loyal armies quickly learn that certain lines are not crossed twice. And here's the uncomfortable point. Often he doesn't apply consequences because he fears losing people. But constant adaptability teaches that losing those who don't respect your boundaries is a strategic gain. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean being permissive. It means acting with clarity and fairness. If someone insists on overstepping the mark, he can calmly say, "I've already talked about this. If you continue, I'll walk away." No shouting, no drama, no long justification. The strength lies in simplicity. When the boundary starts to have consequences, the environment changes. And curiously, those who didn't respect it begin to adjust their behavior. But if he doesn't protect his space, something even more corrosive begins to happen. Something that affects not only his authority, but also the value of his time. He may not have realized it yet, but time is the clearest currency of social hierarchy. When someone is repeatedly late, cancels at the last minute, or makes promises they don't keep, they are sending a silent message. Your time is flexible, mine isn't. And if he accepts this without adjustment, he reinforces this structure. Machiavelli already understood that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires reading signs, not words. Decisions based on real human nature show that chronic delays are not disorganization, they are prioritization. Better to be feared than loved can mean something simple here, not being seen as an always available option. The end justifies the means when the means is to protect what never returns, your hours. Because whoever controls your time controls your position. Imagine a common situation. Someone schedules a meeting for 2 p.m. and arrives at 2:40 p.m. with a "sorry, traffic." Once, okay, good fortune. Twice, coincidence. 3 times, pattern. Virtù and fortune require discernment. Fortune explains the unforeseen. Virtù demands a strategic reaction. He can calmly say, "Let's reschedule for another day, I can't make it today," without lengthy explanations. That's calculated use of force. It's not rudeness, it's alignment. Self-respecting and loyal armies quickly learn that commitments have weight, and avoiding being hated isn't about accepting any lateness to appear understanding. It's about applying consequences without humiliating. Constant adaptability means adjusting availability according to the other person's behavior. The most dangerous thing is when he starts to adapt too much. He adjusts his schedule, waits, becomes flexible, explains himself. And those who disrespect him learn that they don't need to adjust. The appearance of virtue, being chill, calm, flexible, can cost authority. And authority, when eroded, affects everything: business, relationships, opportunities. If he wants to grow, he needs to treat his own time as a strategic asset. Reading books like Essentialism by Greg McKeown helps reinforce this practical mindset. Applying schedule blocks, confirming appointments hours in advance, cancelling after a certain delay limit, that's well-executed personal policy. Because when his time becomes a real priority, something curious happens. People start to better measure their own actions, but the test doesn't stop there. It evolves into something even more subtle and dangerous, the responsibility that is never equal for both sides. There's an extremely revealing pattern that few people notice. When their mistakes always have an explanation, and his always involves blame. This is the game of selective responsibility, and it's more common than it seems. Machiavelli taught that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires observing invisible power structures. If, in a relationship, one person's slips are treated as circumstances, while his are treated as character flaws, there is an imbalance. Decisions based on real human nature show that those who accept this pattern internalize inferiority, and little by little, they begin to apologize for existing. Better to be feared than loved here means something deeper, to be respected as an equal. The end justifies the means when the means is to interrupt an unjust dynamic. Because if he doesn't correct it early, it becomes a silent rule. Here's a simple example. He forgets something small and hears, "You're always like this." The other person makes a bigger mistake and says, "I was overwhelmed." Do you see the difference? One becomes identity, the other becomes situation. The appearance of virtue comes into play strongly here. Often, he accepts this to seem understanding, mature, evolved. But calculated use of force isn't about fighting, it's about calmly pointing things out. When I make a mistake, it becomes the norm. When you make a mistake, it becomes justification. That's not balanced. Virtu and Fortuna appear again. Fortuna is the inevitable mistake. Virtu is how he repositions the narrative. His own loyal armies don't operate under double standards, and avoiding being hated doesn't mean accepting injustice to maintain artificial harmony. The greatest danger is psychological. If this dynamic continues, he begins to doubt his own judgment. He starts to think that perhaps he is indeed the problem. Constant adaptability requires sharp self-awareness. He can start by noting mental patterns. Who apologizes first? Who always explains themselves? Who always gives in? This observation changes everything, because shared responsibility generates mutual respect. Unilateral responsibility generates control. And when someone realizes they can transfer blame without resistance, the next step is usually even bolder. It begins to target something he deeply values, his personal standards. When he starts to evolve, something curious happens. Not everyone celebrates, some feel threatened, and then a subtle movement emerges, discrediting his new standards. He decides to position himself better, charge more, demand respect, stop tolerating crumbs. And someone responds ironically, "Now you're being too demanding." Machiavelli already taught that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, reveals an uncomfortable truth. When you raise the bar, those who benefited from your previous tolerance react. Decisions based on real human nature show that people adapt to the level you accept. If he accepted little, he received little. When he changes, the system around him tries to pull him back. Better to be feared than loved here means not giving in to remain comfortable. Imagine he decides he will no longer accept delays, disrespect, or empty promises. Suddenly, someone says he has changed, that he is cold, that it used to be easier to deal with. An appearance of virtue might lead him to want to prove he is still the same. But calculated use of force demands the opposite, silent firmness. The end justifies the means when the means are to protect his growth. Virtu and Fortuna come into play again. Fortuna is external resistance. Virtu is internal constancy. His own loyal armies remain when standards rise. Opportunists are driven away, and this is not strategic loss, it is filtering. The real test comes when he starts to doubt himself. Am I overdoing it? That question is the critical point. Constant adaptability isn't about lowering the standard to please, it's about adjusting the environment to align with his new level. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean backsliding to be accepted. It means maintaining respect even under pressure. He might respond with something simple. I'm just aligning my choices with what I want to build. No aggression, no long explanation, because when he maintains the standard despite the pressure, he sends a powerful signal. But those who feel challenged rarely accept it at first. And often there's an even more calculated move, a silent test to see if he's really changed. Here's the point that separates discourse from real authority: the test. Whenever he sets a limit, someone will verify if it was serious or just a moment of impulse. Machiavelli understood this mechanism deeply. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means expecting the test and being prepared for it. Decisions based on real human nature show that after a new stance, people observe whether there will be consistency. Better to be feared than loved in this context is to be predictable in the consequence. If he said he doesn't accept certain behavior, someone will try to repeat it in a more subtle way. It's not a coincidence, it's measuring territory. The end justifies the means when the means is to consolidate respect. And respect is not born from the first statement, it is born from the second reaction. Imagine he said, "I will no longer tolerate this type of comment." Days later, a lighter version comes along, almost disguised, almost a joke. If he laughs, he lost. If he ignores it, he opened a breach. The calculated use of force here is to respond immediately, with calm firmness. "I was serious last time," without raising your voice, without dramatizing. Virtu and fortuna come into play again. Fortuna is the unexpected test. Virtu is the consistency in the response. Self-respecting and loyal armies learn quickly when they realize that the rule doesn't change with the weather. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean softening the consequence to seem agreeable. It means applying the rule justly, always in the same way. And here's the hardest truth. If he fails at this moment, everything reverts to the previous stage. Constant adaptability isn't about changing posture with every discomfort. It's about maintaining posture even when there's tension, because disrespect doesn't happen to him, it's allowed by him. If he allowed it once, he can stop it now. If he tolerated it in the past, he can redefine it in the present. It doesn't matter how long it took him to realize it. What matters is what he does from here on out. And when he starts applying this consistently, something changes in the entire environment. People adjust their tone, posture, and behavior. The game changes. Because true authority isn't shouted, it's tested and maintained. Now let me ask you a direct, almost uncomfortable question. How many times have you called what was, deep down, fear of confrontation, maturity? How many times have you said, everything's fine, when everything wasn't fine? Machiavelli wasn't talking about coldness. He was talking about lucidity. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, begins when you stop romanticizing your own silence. Disrespect doesn't spring from nowhere. It grows where it finds space. And if you recognized any of these signs today, that's not a reason for guilt. It's a sign of awareness. Better to be feared than loved sometimes simply means being firm enough not to betray yourself. The end justifies the means when the means is protecting your dignity, and dignity is non-negotiable. Now think honestly, who today tests your limits? Where have you been applying the appearance of virtue when you should be applying the calculated use of force? Where has responsibility been selective? Where has your time been treated as disposable? Decisions based on real human nature require practical action. Perhaps you need to reduce access. Perhaps you need to respond immediately. Perhaps you simply need to stop over-explaining. Virtu and fortuna are not abstract concepts. They are posture and reaction. Your own loyal armies only remain when there is clarity of leadership. Constant adaptability is not changing to please. It is adjusting to grow. Avoiding being hated is not avoiding discomfort. It is acting justly, even if someone is bothered. And now I want to know, will you continue to allow small signs of manipulation, or will you start applying strategic consequences? Which of these signs have you recognized in your own life? Write them in the comments. I want to see who is really paying attention. And if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, we don't talk about pretty theory, we talk about reality. And the more you understand the invisible games, the less you are controlled by them.